Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be going over Lexus's new gauge cluster and infotainment system. We're using the Lexus RZ to test this out, so with that being said, let's get right into it. Now let's start off by going over some controls. So controls on the steering wheel are typically for the center gauge cluster, but not in the case of a lot of modern Lexus models. Instead, these actually control the heads-up display. So you've got the arrow buttons to switch between different functions, and then the little button that looks like a bunch of pages that also switches between functions. So if we take a look at the heads-up display, I'm on the right side of the steering wheel. You notice that this scrolls through different cruise control items, but then if I press those pages buttons, now it's scrolling through ways to customize the display, to move it up and down, and then also to change the information the display shows. Now, not only does that change the heads-up display, it also, sorry about the camera not wanting to focus there, changes the display here in the center. So it kind of does both on that one. And then same thing with the other side. So this is kind of more of like a media setup here, but basically you can change if it controls the channel, the volume, and all of that. So pretty straightforward with that. Now as for the actual gauge cluster itself, it will change what it looks like depending on the drive mode that you put it in. And you can see the drive mode off to the side there. And then there's another way to actually change it. Now I'll show how to get to this a little bit later, but we've got type 1 meter, type 2, and then type 3 that you can scroll between, and that also changes the look of the gauge cluster. And well, this leads us to the center infotainment system, which, yeah, this pretty much controls everything. So shortcut bar here on the side. So if you want to go into the individual tabs, just click on those buttons and that will scroll into everything. And then you do have the climate controls built into the screen as well. This is pretty straightforward. This is always available here at the bottom in terms of real estate. You got little dials that you twist for the temperature. If you want to turn on the heated or cooled seat function, you just press those little buttons right there. And so yes, it is technically built into the screen, but it's always available. I find this interesting that this is your frequently used tab, which is nice. So with the, you can select what this has, by the way. So with this to turn on and off the safety tech, the drive modes, and then you can see on the other side with the climate, and then you can also have your climate concierge system turned on, and that'll automatically, well, if it'll ever focus, it'll automatically make the climate do what you want it to do. Well, basically whatever the temperature is outside, the climate will do that. Now, if we're on the vehicle tab here, this is where you'll actually turn on or off the different drive modes. This is also with the safety tech. It does take a second for some of the stuff to load up, to turn that on or off. And then your active sound control, you can see here, lets you know what's happening. You can turn it off if you don't want to have electric sound. And then your trip information, charging schedule, right, which is always important. And then tire pressure, right? So you notice a lot of stuff that you normally see in the center gauge cluster is instead built into the center infotainment system here. Now the next important tab is the settings tab here. So it has personal information that you plug into the car if you want to manage your devices. General, right? This is pretty straightforward. Change the date and time, accessibility, the language that this is set within. Notifications if you don't want the software updates, right? And then your Wi-Fi. I went back to general. Whoops. Sound and media is important to a lot of people, right? So the tuning, gotta have all that bass, right? I'll go to vehicle customize in a moment, but if you want to turn on or off more safety tech, this is kind of like a more in-depth way rather than the shortcuts that I showed you earlier. Voice search, right? A lot of cars have that with the voice commands. And then the rest of the stuff, you're probably never going to do this, but it just gives you the dealer info and everything. Now, vehicle customize. This is important. So like heads-up display, do you want it on or off? The meter, this is where you change what that center gauge cluster actually looks like there. Interesting. You can also switch through the center gauge cluster display with that. Lights, right? Do you want them on when you turn off the car? And then the theme. So this changes, it should change the center theme here. Let's see. What? I thought this was supposed to change the... Let's do afterglow. Oh, this is the ambient lighting. I'm stupid. Anyways, door control. They don't pay me to be smart. And then if you want the seat to slide and everything, and the steering wheel when you get in and out of the car, and then the custom drive mode, right? That's pretty self-explanatory. What do you want the custom drive mode to actually do, your charging, tire pressure selection. Oh, and then this is very important. So steering switch, again, these are these controls right here on the steering wheel. You can change what that actually does on the left side and the right side. So they do let you customize that as well. I love winter gloves mode, that's cool. Man, it's not bad, but you have to kind of, it takes a second because you got to do a lot of scrolling with this and your climate. So yeah, basically the way that I'm looking at this is pretty much everything that's normally in the gauge cluster is in the infotainment system or in the heads-up display with the modern Lexus cars. Now this isn't really related to infotainment system, but this is still a cool feature. So if you press this button, and they're probably going to release this in more Lexus cars. This is in the RZ, but that's also kind of a cool feature. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about this whole setup with these modern Lexus cars. Definitely takes a second to get used to it, but once you get used to it, not too bad.